All right. Well, it's 12:03, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm Kate O'Connor from Catskill Mountain Keeper. I'm joined by John Thompson of CRISP and Mark Wolf. We're really excited to talk to you today about the native plants of the Catskills. Many of you probably are familiar with Mountain Keeper for all of the advocacy work that we do to promote sustainable development and environmental justice in the Catskills, as well as protecting native plants through raising awareness about invasive species and managing high recreation sites with our stewardship program in partnership with the Catskill Center. I do hope that you'll join us again later tonight at 6:15. Mountain Keeper is hosting a Catskill Park Day webinar. We'll be joined by policymakers and state land managers to talk about the future of the Catskill Park. So if that's something you're passionate about, come on back at 6:15 and join us. You can register on the Mountain Keeper webpage for that. We'd love to have you as part of the conversation. But for now, the good stuff. Really excited to talk about native plants today. So I'm going to turn it over to John Thompson, who's joining us from CRISP, to talk a little bit about CRISP's work in the Catskills.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Thompson, the Catskill Regional Invasive Species Partnership Coordinator. My program surveys for emerging invasive species and works to limit their spread in the Catskills. We've also done some native plantings in areas that are hard hit by invasives. And I work at the Catskill Center, where we advocate for the Catskill Park. The Catskill Center operates the Catskill Visitor Center to orient visitors to the Catskills. And we protect land as a land trust and through our streamside acquisition program. So thanks for inviting me.
So happy to have you, John, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for you in the Q&A session. So I'm glad to have you. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for, Mark Wolf, Director of the Mountaintop Arboretum, to talk about some of the beautiful native plants of the Catskills and how you might be able to incorporate them into your space. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that, Mark, you can go ahead. Do you want to introduce yourself and Mountaintop?
Yeah, I'll go to the first thing, make sure we're up and running.
Great.
Okay, does that look good to you, Kate?
That looks great, I can see.
Okay, hi everybody, I'm Mark Wolf. I'm the Executive Director at Mountaintop Arboretum, which is in Tannersville, New York. And I'm gonna get a little more into Mountaintop Arboretum's, the location, et cetera, as we go into it. But today I'm just excited to talk to you about the native plantings we did around the new timber frame education, the new education center, which I'm standing in, which you may be able to see some of the timber frames, and I'll get into the education center too. But we use Catskill native plants around the education center, and that's what we're going to get to. But first, I want to just get into this by sort of talking about how important the Catskills are. We all know, I think our audience knows how important we are, but this is a map that EPA did of ecoregions. And at the bottom of the slide, you see ecoregions. They define them as areas where the ecosystems are generally similar. And if we zoom in a bit, I hope you can see my pointer here, the red arrow. This is the Catskills. It's a little island ecoregion surrounded by the northern Allegheny Plateau and then the Hudson Valley, which is more of a coastal ecoregion actually. And you can see that we're sort of, not only are we a little island, but we're sort of at the southern end of the other 58s, which is our number. And as you go south here, these are lower elevations. So we're really at a very high elevation and at the southern area. And we are our own, if you drill down a little further, we're our own Catskill High Peaks ecoregion in the Catskills. This is important for a lot of reasons, one of which is we discovered when we did a natural resources inventory in 2018, where we studied, we surveyed all the plants, we surveyed insects, bats, birds, we looked at the geology, we looked at the forest history, and we learned a lot, of course, but one of the outstanding things we learned was that the Arboretum, and we would then think the Catskill High Peaks region, is a southern outpost for many of the more northern species and the more montane species, like the species that live in the mountains, species of insects. So it's a really important area as climate change happens to keep an eye on phenology and to keep an eye on what insects are either disappearing or appearing. Now, I think I may be singing with the choir or to the choir here, or whatever that phrase is, but just briefly, that we are, I've used this little icon, the red trees and the little mountains. This is where we live, Mountaintop Arboretum, within the blue line of the Catskill Park. And I'm sure many of you know the blue line was created in 1904 by New York State to preserve the land that had been highly disturbed from, in the 19th century with logging and tanning. We are in Tannersville, so the tanning industry. We are at 2,400 foot elevation, which is gives us long winters and short growing season. There are plant hardiness zones, which basically means what zone are you in where you can plant certain plants where they would be hardy to that the cold temperatures that you get. Technically, we're a zone 5B. However, the Hudson Valley is also a zone 5B, and it really feels more like we're a zone 4 or 5, which is much colder than the rest of zone 5B. For instance, it's very difficult for us to grow flowering dogwoods up here. I know one person that's been able to. I've tried once and one died. In horticulture, we say you have to kill a plant 3 times before it's a failure, so we may try again. But that just gives you an idea. And also, this is Palinville here. It's about 10 miles east of us. The lilacs in Palinville bloom consistently 3 weeks earlier than our lilacs, so that's just 10 miles away. So it's just a very different, colder and shorter season. I also just want to say that we're called Mountaintop Arboretum, not only because we're on a mountaintop, but our area of the 3 towns of Jewett, Hunter, and Windham, the locals down the mountain and up here on the mountain call the area the Mountaintop. So there's Mountaintop Historical Society, Mountaintop Library. So Mountaintop Arboretum not only describes that we're on top of a mountain, but also that we're a part of this really vibrant community. Now, again, preaching to the choir, but very quickly, here we are again, the little red trees. We're in the Schoharie watershed, which I'm sure many of you know. New York City started building the reservoirs in 1906. The Ashokan down here was the first one. We supply 90% of New York City's drinking water, and including the counties north of New York City, drinking water for 9 million people. I always have to talk about this because our potential for teaching about water and ecosystem health and how you can use native plants, we really can do all this when we talk to our visitors about the importance of the watershed. And our water, the way water moves from the Catskills to the city is just brilliant. All our water moves northwest up down the Schoharie to the Schoharie Reservoir, and then at times there's a tunnel that runs through the mountains through Shandaken, and the water goes through this tunnel, emerges in the Esopus and Phoenicia, runs down to the Ashokan, and then meets the waters from the western watersheds, and that all goes down towards the city and its suburbs. So, again, knowing who my audience is, I'm going to say this is a view of the Arboretum facing southeast from a little mountain called Parker Mountain, which overlooks the Arboretum. And just so you can place yourself, the Hudson Valley is back here. This is Catskill High Peak, Round Top. I think this is Plattekill. This is Indian Head and Twin. And so we're nestled in here. This is the West Meadow, which was the first, and I'll get into this a little more soon. The first part of the Arboretum was created in '77 as the West Meadow. We added a little woodland walk down here, which is only 4 acres. And then if you walk down a road, there's an East Meadow here. And about 15 years ago, we acquired 150 acres. So from 77 till today, we've gone from 6 acres to 173 acres. This is a 150 acre approximate DEP easement. So this map here on the right is part of what we did with the natural resources inventory. And I'm going to use this map to sort of refer to the different areas of the Arboretum. And all the different color codes in here, you're probably not going to be able to read these, but they're all plant habitats. And I'll just give you an example, if I can see them. There's hemlock forest, there's hemlock northern hardwood forest, there's hemlock spruce forest, there's hemlock spruce hardwood forest, there's northern hardwood forest, there's upland meadow, there's upland shrubland. So all these different habitats were what we learned about from this inventory, and they've become really helpful in driving our choices in plants as we move forward. So just a quick tour of the Arboretum. There's a red circle up here. That's the West Meadow, the original 6 acres, which has a man-made pond that was built late 70s, early 80s. And it's great for the kids and classes to catch dragonflies, darning needles, things out of the pond, and to do experiments. We also have some very beautiful garden features. This is the spiral garden, which has some native grasses and some native perennials, but it's mostly non-native, native-esque, like pollinator-friendly kind of perennials. But it's a beautiful garden, and it's got real four-season interest when the different plants are blooming throughout. And even in the winter, we have these beautiful wave shapes that happen because it's so windy up there, it sort of gets blown into these waves. A lot of what we do is designed for winter interest, and I'll talk about different things as we move on. Now, I've just moved our little red circle down to this 4-acre woodland walk, which is deer fenced. We have a mountain laurel collection, among other things in the woodland walk. We have an outdoor classroom there where we hold classes and programs. And there's some really interesting native to the Northeast trees. This is mountain silverbell, which is native to the southern Appalachian Mountains. It's closely related to Carolina silverbell, but this is the more montane species. It's got this very cool striped bark, these really cool seed pods that are in 4 compartments. And then in the spring, before it goes to seed, it's got these lovely silverbell kind of flowers, which go from a white to a soft pink. So this is an understory tree, and meaning it grows under the canopy trees like the oaks and the maples and the beeches. And we have a whole collection of understory trees in the woodland walk. We're also experimenting with the emerald ash borer and saving 150 ash trees. They are inoculated on a 3-year cycle, and we're working with Mark Whitmore of Cornell University to do this study to see how effective these treatments are. And so far they are effective, but that's an ongoing study. So if you want to be in 150 fairly healthy ash trees, come visit us. East Meadow we now moved out here where the red circle is here. The East Meadow starts with this pine alley. We don't know who planted this pine alley. There were quite a few trees in this area like European larch and red pine and even northern white cedar that were planted in this area in the 1930s and 40s when the Civilian Conservation Corps was reforesting farmland and other disturbed land. But we don't know for sure if these trees were planted then. But on either side here, there's quite a diverse array of native sedges and grasses and ground covers like bunchberry, partridgeberry, that kind of lowbush blueberry, that kind of thing. This is a down pine tree. We try and show people how you don't have to chip, you don't have to remove everything to make it pristine. You can let logs rot and you can be creative as they rot too. This is a very favorite site for people. We also in the East Meadow have the hedgerow to show you what you can do instead of, say, the boxwood hedge. There's a road behind here. Here's the power lines, and here's a telephone pole. There's a major county road back here. And this is a dreary day in March or April, but as you can see, these shrubs are going to give you lots of color throughout the winter. There's native red twig dogwood. There's a cultivar of red twig called cardinal. There are pussy willows in here. There are other non-native willows. There's winterberry and gray dogwood. So there's a mix of native and non-native shrubs just to show you how you can create habitat and create beauty, again, in winter too, especially. And in the East Meadow, we have a swamp that boardwalk moves through. The swamp is native spirea, asters and goldenrods. It's very lovely. Oh, and birding here is very important. This is the best place for birding at the Arboretum because of these woodland edges and I guess the wetland too. And I'll talk about woodland edges a little later. Now we're moving down to this big circle here. This is the DEP easement, which is about 150 acres. One of the great features here is the Emerald Bog, which is on top, which Mike Kudas, the forest historian, has carbon dated as the oldest recorded bog so far in the Catskills. It has peat down about 18 feet, and we have going back 14,900 years of peat. And what's kind of cool is 13,000 years ago, the forest started to move in. And 13,000 years ago, we see the dominant species being hemlock, red spruce, balsam fir, and yellow birch. Even with all the disturbance that many of you know happened in the 19th and early 20th centuries in the Catskills, those have come back as the dominant species. So when you're walking through, you're seeing the same forest composition that would have been there 13,000 years ago. Of course, our trees have only been growing now since the mid to late 1800s. So they were probably twice as big, the trees way back then. And there are beautiful trails through the Spruce Glen leading to Hidden Marsh, which is the largest marsh at our elevation that I know of, or others I know of, in the Catskills. It's about 14 acres. It's quite stunning because you get to it through the dark hemlock spruce grove, and you come out into this really wonderful marshland surrounded by mountains. So in the winter of 17, we had decided we wanted to build a timber frame education center, and we wanted to use as many native tree species as possible. Timber framing is a 7,000-year-old human way of building structures and using the trees around us. And so sort of as a celebration of our trees, but also our connection, humans' connection to them, we wanted to show off as many species as we could. This is a photo, and so the design by Jack Sobun called for these kind of branching patterns in the design. This is just one sheet of many sheets. And here, Brad is the timber framer. He's explaining to the loggers what kind of branching pattern he wants from the tree he chose, so that when they take it down, it doesn't split the branching pattern he's looking for. He's looking for how to cut it, what length, and all that. So it was a really fascinating process. About 7 of us walked through our forest, picking out trees that we thought we could use. It wouldn't really affect the visitor experience deeper in the forest, and it's really, our building is from the forest. That's the design. The trees we removed most of the trees in winter, but some were removed in the fall, and we did use horses to less impact on the forest soils. And here are horses dragging out what looks like a yellow birch. Everything was brought to Brad's workshop in Mount Greylock in the Berkshires, where the lumber was milled, brought back to the Arboretum, and raised. And this is the final, what it looks like now on the right. On the left, the landscape architect Jack Sobun did these drawings for us, these keys. So if you're standing in the meeting room and other parts of the building, you have a key and you can see, well, I want to know on the right here, what's this big timber here? You go back to this shape here, and it might be blurred for you, but I can see it's number 15, and then all the trees are labeled, and black cherry is 15. So now I know that's a black cherry. And the floors are, this is a black cherry border around sugar maple floor. So the whole thing is beautifully constructed and coated. Now we're going to get into the plants that we used around the education center. The Arboretum wasn't begun really focused on native plants, but over the years it's moved towards that. And the landscape architect, Jamie Purinton, and I really wanted to use native plants around the education center, and native plants native to the Catskills, which isn't that easy to do because there's not a published flora of the Catskills that I know of. If anybody knows, let me know. People have, send it into the Q&A. People have been threatening to publish flora of the Catskills, but we don't know of one. But we talked to people like Mike Kudish, Catskill Native Nursery. The New York Flora Atlas is really helpful for looking at county by county, what plants are native to that county. And again, this is our natural resources inventory map. And from this map, Jamie and I decided that we wanted to take 3 kinds of habitats. One, this is not Jamie, this is Claudia West, who is a brilliant horticulturist and native plant designer. And she and I are looking at poverty oakgrass, which is growing in the bedrock in the Arboretum's West Meadow. So we wanted to get this for around the edges of the pathways and other areas around the education center. And then another habitat we like is the woodland edges I mentioned before, because of the importance for habitat along that edge. And then wetlands inspired our rain gardens. That's the hidden marsh again. We deal with a lot of rain, as you know. We're getting a lot of rain off the mountains. We're getting a lot of rain off neighboring roads. In our parking areas, we wanted to make the area in the parking areas and around the building, we wanted some rain gardens. So Jamie developed this planting design, and we had our whole plant list here, which, as I said, took a while to come to because of what is native to the Catskills. And I have shared with Kate a plant list of what's planted where around the education center. And I think we'll send that out with a follow-up email. So you don't have to scribble everything down as I go through these plants. Further, just a little closer in this design, in blue here are the rain gardens, and they're connected underground by a pipe that connects them as they overflow. They go and they drain into a pipe and then drain into the large rain garden, which drains under this driveway into the hidden marsh, eventually into the Schoharie eventually, and down to New York City eventually. So let's get into some of the plants. I'll start with the hidden marsh first. One of the plants we love here is the speckled alder. It grows in drifts where it can through the marsh. So it's obviously a great wetland species. And this is it planted in the education center's largest rain garden. And Jamie and I both love this plant. It's not really used very much in landscape design. And watching it now closely through the years, this was planted in 2019 in the fall. And then we planted all the perennials in the following spring in 2020. The architecture of this plant, the strong structure of it, I like a lot. You see the foliage here. It's almost like potato chip kind of a quality. It's a very strong, textured leaf. And then talk about winter interest again. These are the male flowers that they emerge in late winter, early spring, and they elongate through the season. And they're this beautiful, they become sort of like, curtain, what the thing's called at the ends of curtains that sort of shimmer around. So a shrub with no leaves out, it's winter, it's snow, there's no flowers, and you have this shrub of curtain material. It's really, really beautiful. And then this is in the hidden marsh, these fruits persist. The dried fruits persist through the winter. So they're also giving interest. A nice plant here in front is slender leaf mountain mint, which is mountain mints are great pollinator plants. And this is one that has almost a grass-like quality, and then it flowers in these lovely small white flowers. Another great shrub for the area is the rose shale or early azalea. It's closely related to the pinkster azalea, which many of you know. This is the montane, more mountainous species that we have that's native up here. And supposedly it has a stronger fragrance. And this is quite strong a fragrance. You can really smell it wafting on the wind at the right time and when it's in bloom. And supposedly has a slightly darker color than the pinkster. But again, there are morphological differences, but very close relative, and a beautiful deciduous azalea. Now this is looking back in the hidden marsh again, these swamp candles, Lysimachia terrestris, you can see them blooming all through, these yellow flecks all through the marsh. So we decided we would use these in the rain gardens. And here's a blue flag iris, and they bloom at the same time. So we decided we would pair them with blue flag iris in the rain gardens. One plant that I love, which we didn't use because it's so tiny. This from this little bit of the plant here to here is about a 1/4 inch. This is round leaf sundew, and these are tiny, tiny round leaf sundews growing in the sphagnum moss in the marsh. These are carnivorous plants, and now and again I do find little tiny, tiny like gnats inside them. They look like little jewels, and you have to really get on your stomach in the boardwalk to get a look at them. We did not use this in the rain garden, it's just too small. As I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of teaching, and so we wanted to have small rain gardens so that visitors would be inspired and can learn a bit about how they could do this in their own, in their own yard. So in these smaller rain gardens, we use smaller plants, some of them. This is a lovely avens called water avens that I had found growing along the dirt road that runs through the Arboretum. I just love that sort of dusty pink color. It's a small plant, maybe it's 12 inches, maybe 15 inches tall. Another small plant, almost like a ground cover, is this closed gentian or bottle gentian. These flowers don't open, and it's just this cool shape to the flower. These are taller plants. Cardinal flower is the red in back. For real, again, these are all rain garden areas. And monkey flower is a really beautiful little. It's a taller plant, but it's a beautiful little flower that I think the color combination with the others is very, very beautiful. We also use a lot of sedges and rushes and grasses. This is grazed sedge, and these are quite maybe an inch at least, these seed balls. They go to brown and in the late fall and into the winter. So people are always asking about those. They're really striking, really interesting plant among quite a few sedges that we use. Here's bulrush, the brown with swamp milkweed. Of course, swamp milkweed is a great plant for wetlands. And I like that this bulrush is in flower, and I like the brown. I like that texture to it and how it plays off of the swamp milkweed. And here's a plant, I just threw this in yesterday, this picture, blue vervain, Verbena hustata. People don't use this that much, but I see it popping up around the Catskills. It comes in naturally. I don't think it's a long-lived perennial, but we planted it in some drifts, some movements of groups of them through the rain gardens. And you see that structure. They're beautiful. The color's beautiful. It can be 4 feet tall. Now, again, I don't think it's that long-lived, but it will pop up around. And wherever it pops up, it always seems to find a beautiful place to do it. So we like this plant a lot. In June of 2019, we planted the perennials. As you can see, there are some gallon plants, but these are all plug trays, so mostly really small plugs. And then about a year later, it had really filled in nicely. This is July, so for us, that's sort of really kind of late spring. There's beautiful Penstemon hirsutus. There's the swamp milkweed. I can see the blue vervain moving through here. There's lots of things in flower here. And then a month later, it's a little more floriferous with the cardinal flower. It looks like there is Penstemon blooming back here. And this is the slender leaf mountain mint. And this is the largest rain garden around the education center. So the other, another area is the woodland edge. There's a existing striped maple here, and we planted a small grove moving out towards the parking areas of striped maple. We used a lot of ferns, grasses, different wildflowers too, and some, two here are the blue stem goldenrod, which is a shady goldenrod, and white wood aster. Now, white wood aster I love. It is a tough plant. It will outcompete weeds. It may outcompete other things, that more delicate things. But we have 178 acres, 2.5 staff people, me, 1 horticulturist, and an administrative assistant. So we need plants that can outcompete the weeds, and they can sort of battle it out with each other. So white wood aster we use for that reason. A lot of our plants we use are aggressive, but we need that to help us garden. These maples. This is beautiful photos. We did a book on the building of the education center where it features all the trees, and Rob Cardillo was the photographer for the book, and he spent over a course of a year, he came up and took these gorgeous photos of each of the trees. This is a maple. It's also called goosefoot maple, these really large leaves that are this like butter yellow, and these flowers are just beautiful. They hang down in these chains, and then they turn to the maple samaras, which would contain the seeds in the fall. The bark is beautiful, and through the winter and into early spring, big red, beautiful, striking buds. So this is an understory tree. Many people consider it weedy. I think this is a beautiful Catskill native tree. Oh, this is a little video I took. I don't know if you can hear me talking now, but a yellow birch had fallen on a striped maple over a creek by my house. So I'm always looking for, suggestions from nature. So if you want to have a beautiful scene over a pond or a stream, plant a striped maple and start having it lean, start weighting it down, let it lean over. Look at this, it's in flower, these beautiful, I think it's in flower. It might be in seed. I think it's, I'm not sure actually, but it's a really lovely plant. And you can see those nice big leaves that turn a light yellow in the fall, which is really a nice contrast against the more strong oranges and reds of the maples and other, bright colored fall trees. Another great understory tree is musclewood, American hornbeam. Called musclewood because of this sinewy texture that it has in the bark. It looks like a Wizard of Oz tree to me. I just love these. And then it also, the flowers are kind of inconspicuous, but it goes into these interesting seed pods. And the fall color, it can vary from maroon to gold. Really beautiful fall color. Nice small tree for your yards or gardens. So here's a musclewood planted right in our parking area. Along with these shrubs are the native viburnum, wild raisin or witherrod viburnum, which has a white flower, like an umbel, kind of flat-topped white, a lot of little white flowers. And then when it goes to fruit, which is when I really love it, it's every color from a light pink to dark pink to black, blue to purples. Really very striking fruit set on them. And the fall color is very nice too, like purpley maroon. A plant down here is Golden Alexander, another tough, can be aggressive plant native to the Catskills, has a nice fine yellow flower in the early spring. And then these seed heads stay. And a lot of visitors comment on these, how beautiful they are, nice structure to them and nice interest. And behind them, the white is again that slenderleaf mountain mint in bloom. Now the mountaintop bedrock outcrops. So you saw this picture before. We're looking at a nice little grass called poverty oak grass. And then behind me growing down here is a little like subalpine ground cover, very rare in the Catskills, but it's growing naturally in the bedrock here on the Arboretum. And it's got a really pretty white, kind of large for its size, white flower that sticks up an inch from the foliage in the spring. It's evergreen, so it's got a nice rusty red fall color. Tough, supposedly it's not a very competitive plant, but you know, you put it in gravel and it really travels and it does really well. Other tough plants we use in our bedrock outcrop places around the education center is this gray goldenrod, not an aggressive goldenrod. And then this silverrod to the right is growing with gray goldenrod in our meadow, and it's a white goldenrod. Here's another little video. Again, when I'm out, this is Huckleberry Point. This is up front is the poverty oak grass moving in the breeze. And there's also mixed in a grass called wavy hair grass. So, you know, I'm always looking for these for clues from nature. This is a close up of the wavy hair grass. These are grasses that grow maybe 12, 15 inches, woodland edges or openings in the woodland where maybe there's a little sunlight coming through, but they can grow in like light shade. And if you add them all together, this is a kind of effect we were going for along the pathways and the drier, more bouldery areas around the education center. This is a cool plant. This is one of very few cultivars we used. It's growing down here. It's this green foliage here, and here it's gone, fall color. It's a dwarf sand cherry, and the cultivar name is Catskill because it was found on a riverbank in the Delaware, I think, in the Catskills. And we got this from the state and liked it a lot. We got it for another area a couple years before for a volunteer day. They donated plants, and we liked it so much. It's got a rough quality. It creeps through other plantings because it's like a ground cover cherry. With like white, white cherry flowers in the spring. But we really like its habit, and it's got a kind of rough but ornamental look to it. I had mentioned the three-leaf cinquefoil that was growing out in the bedrock. Here it is growing along the path at the education center, and you can see how tough it is here. I love this little picture. They really, it shows you where you can use them. More of these, it's kind of ground cover. Well, they are ground cover plants for these areas. Houstonia is back here. You all may know it. It usually has a little more blue, light bluish tinge to it, but we were getting a lot of white ones. So we took some from the West Meadow when we put them here, and we bought some too. And then this is pussy toes. It grows out in the West Meadow. These flowers are kind of like cat's paws. So it's got a nice ground cover here, and it's got a nice flower. We use them along the edges. And strawberry, wild strawberry. Wild strawberry is very aggressive, and we were worried about it. We've ended up taking it out because it was just out competing the other natives. But if you have a tough site, you can see these really lovely flowers in the spring. It's got nice foliage, and then of course you can eat the fruit when it goes to fruit. I share it with my dog at home. We pick strawberries together. And then instead of a lawn, because we had this small lawn area to design in front of the education center, we decided we wanted to use try a native lawn instead. So we wanted to model it on these areas along the escarpment trail where you have a lot of grasses and it gets licheny. There's low bush blueberry in there. And So it's fenced off here because that was the year we seeded it. And it's coming in. We still want to move a path. We want it to get more bouldery, like bedrock. This is all bedrock in the West Meadow here. So we want to kind of bring that feel through here and let this get a little more bare. But
Mark, I don't want to interrupt you, but we're almost at the end of the scheduled time. So if anyone has to hop off now, just so everyone knows we are recording this, you can check back in on the Mountain Keeper website. I'm going to start to answer some of the chat questions, but go ahead and continue on.
I have 2 more slides. So we wanted to mow this at 4 inches and still use plants that would flower. And here you see that we are mowing it. And here's little asters and goldenrods that are in flower. There's other strawberries and things growing through here too. So this is the Arboretum last week. That's the main big rain garden. Here's some more winter interest. This is Monarda fistulosa, a native plant we use in the sunny areas. So again, we're looking for seed heads that persist to do cool things for us in the winter. So that's the end of the talk. And I'm sorry if I went over a little bit. All these credits are just different projects that I've mentioned as we've gone through the lecture. So, okay, back to you, Kate.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you for sharing all that great information and introducing anyone that hasn't been there to the Mountaintop Arboretum to this great space. And actually, one of the first questions in the chat was, is the Arboretum open to the public? Do we have to be a member? How do we
No, the Arboretum is definitely open to the public. We're open every day of the year. The Education Center is open not every day, but the grounds are open every day. But the Education Center is basically Tuesday through Saturday.
Lovely. And then where do you source your native plants? Do you have any resources that you'd like to share? I know that I have some as well.
I'd say Catskill Native Nursery. There's a great new nursery called Green Bee Nursery up in Cornwallville. Kern's Nursery near us is very good. And we buy, there are places you can buy plugs like North Creek, New Moon Nursery, where you can buy plug trays that are less expensive. But you have to buy those in bulk. You might need to be a wholesaler, but they have, sometimes you can buy. No.
And then we had a question about how do we prevent invasives from coming in? So maybe John or Mark, do you guys have suggestions for how people can keep invasives out of their gardens?
I'll let John take it.
Yeah, well, one person asked, I tried to answer it about invasive jumping worms, which we had a webinar about in December. So I refer people to that. I put in a link in the answer to their question in the Q&A. But basically, the first thing I would say really quickly, you want to determine whether you have invasive worms in your property or not. So I would refer to those resources that I sent to let people know what to look for the signs of invasive jumping worms. And if you don't have them, then I would recommend not bringing in any soil or mulch that you don't know where it came from, or you're not sure whether it might have invasive jumping worms in them. The one thing that you really need to be careful of is that they reproduce and overwinter by these little cocoons, and they're very difficult to see. So even if you buy bare root stock or acquire bare root stock, those cocoons could still be stuck to the roots and you might not see them. You could plant seeds that would be your safest bet with jumping worms. And so the other things to look for invasive plants or anything else that you might be concerned with would be paying attention to what's around you in terms of invasive species, whether it's moving towards your property. If you have a stream, there are invasive plants that could move downstream. And basically, an important thing to do would be to not leave any open soil in your yard. If you disturb the soil, you would want to plant something there to be able to hold the soil in place and also keep invasive plants from moving in.
Great. Mark, do you have anything to add? Any other steps that Mountaintop takes to keep invasives out of your arboretum?
John covered it.
Okay. Great. Okay. There are tons of questions in the chat, and unfortunately we are out of time, but I can save those and we will try to answer them. Mountain Keeper will send out a follow-up email with some answers to everyone's burning questions, as well as the plant list that Mark shared. So if you didn't catch a plant name, it should be on there. I encourage everyone to go visit Mountaintop Arboretum. John said it, Mark said that it's open. It's a great place to look in all seasons of the year. And also check out the CRISP website for information on managing invasives on your property. So thanks everyone for joining. Hope to see you later this afternoon for the Catskill Park webinar, and check out your email box for updates. Thanks to John and Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Everyone.